All right, let's go ahead and let's kick this off. I've got a limited amount of time. So for those of you who are in the session, this is Biohackers, the Invisible Threat. If this was not the session you were intending, you're still in a better place. This is going to be an awesome presentation. So let's go ahead and let's kick this off. So starting out, let's do a little bit of an introduction. My name is Len No. I'm part of the Global Solutions Enablement team, and I am actually one of CyberArk's white hat hackers. I'm a global security speaker, and I've been with CyberArk for going on 8 years. I've been in IT professionally for over 25 years in roles ranging from programmer to systems architect. I've been breaking into computers since the Commodore 64 days, and I spent a really large amount of time in my youth as a black hat or a gray hat hacker. I am professionally trained as well as the fact that I come by a lot of my knowledge by practical application. I'm really active on social media, and I invite everyone here to reach out over LinkedIn. Check out my GitHub and my YouTube channels for additional security-related content. So let's start this off by asking a simple question. What does a cyborg look like? When you hear the word cyborg, what comes to mind? Maybe a Terminator, Star Wars, Star Trek. Anyone who's ever heard the definition probably has a vision in their head, and I'd even be willing to bet that it's pretty shiny and, to some extent, robotic looking. I hate to be the one to pop your bubble, but that's not the case. Cyborgs are not only on the movie screens anymore, they walk among us, and you may be friends with one and don't even know it. These are my hands. I am a biohacker in the truest sense of the word. I'm not only an augmented human with microchips in my hands, but I'm also a white hat hacker. I'm a hacker that has modified my body to take advantage of available technology to turn myself into the attack vector. I'm going to explain what my current chips are, as well as giving you a roadmap on what I'm looking to do in my journey to continue to become more than human. So as I said, these x-rays are my hands, and I have the following capabilities with my current implants. I have what's called a Flex Next. This is a very long-range RFID NFC chip. I have the earlier version of that, which was just called the Next. It's the same as the Flex Next, but the range on this is much, much shorter. This was actually the very first implant that I ever got. I have a Flex M1 Magic 1K. This chip allows me to emulate any number of older access cards, from public transit to membership tokens to physical access. I have a VivoKey Spark 2. This is a cryptobionic chip that can perform strong cryptographic functions. Currently, I have it set up as the key to open my Bitcoin wallet. Since the time these x-rays were taken, I've actually got 2 additional implants. I have a Flex EM. This allows me to emulate most of the popular physical access cards, including the Prox card 1 and 2 and 3, HID, Indala, Pyramid, and a ton more. And I also have a Titan biomagnet. This is a magnet that allows me to actually feel electromagnetic currents and magnetic fields. So augmented humans are not science fiction. We're here. We're not going anywhere. And as the technology continues to evolve, so will we. I've broken this talk into 3 parts: yesterday, today, and tomorrow. I'm not going to go into and spend a lot of time on the history of who we were, just enough to show that the biohacker or transhuman is just the point where science, technology, and humanity meet. The idea behind implanting technology inside the body has been around since the 1950s. The patent for the first cardiac pacemaker was submitted in 1952 and was the size of a table radio. This was not a fully implantable solution and required leads to be connected to an external power source. With the advent of the transistor in the mid-1950s, the ability to construct a fully implantable device was achieved in May of 1958. The first implantable technology was actually placed inside of a test animal. The first human to receive an electrical device implanted in the body was in Buffalo, New York in 1960. The tech up to this point was pretty static and didn't allow for much in the way of conditional executions or modifications from the original programming. 1964 actually gave us the first implantable technology that can take data from the body itself. Through the 70s and 80s, there were advancements, but nothing that would really set the world on its ear. 1990 is when things really started to pick up for the implant community, from the creation of smart devices all the way through to today where the discussions of AI are pretty commonplace. For biohackers, our history was forged by the medical profession to address deficiencies of the human body from a reactive perspective. By that, I mean the issues were already there. Additionally, there were no options for an individual to enhance themselves through technology. So the question now is, who are we today? People like myself are referred to by multiple names: biohacker, grinder, transhuman. Regardless of what name you want to put on us, we all share the same concept of moving beyond the human form that we were born into. The term transhuman was actually first coined by Julian Huxley in 1957. The movement he created was fueled by multiple people looking to extend the capabilities of the human being itself. So where do you find implantable technology? The same place we find everything else, the internet. Now, before I go any further, I do want to say I do not have any type of additional relationship with this company. I just happen to pick this company as the one that I deal with. They're called dangerousthings.com. And the only reason I even say that is because I get a lot of questions in the Q&A as to where did I get my implants. Do your research if this is something that you're interested in. There are multiple, different commercial grade implant distributors. Do the research. This is just who I chose. There are a ton of different kinds of implantable technologies available out there. We have magnets, both lifting and biosensing. We have flexible membrane NFC. We have flexible membrane RFID. We have encapsulated NFC and RFID. And for all of our, really club style people, the ones that want to go out and have a great time on Friday and Saturday nights, we actually even have implantable LEDs. And there are multiple variants within these categories to address specific use case requirements. I'm not going to show the procedure on how to install these implants. Let's just say there are needles, scalpels, dermal elevators, depending on what type of implant we're going to get. I will throw a quick shout out here. If this is something that you are interested in seeing, I'm doing another presentation next week for one of the DEF CON chapters in Newcastle, UK. And you can search for me on Eventbrite and you will have no problems finding this. It's for DC 44191. So these devices were designed to make people's lives easier. We have the ability to start our vehicles with implants. Imagine never losing your keys again. Or how many people have fobs to access a gym or a shared garage or a storage unit? All of these could be stored on an implant. What about being able to pay for goods and services with the same methods as Apple Pay or the Android Wallet, but you never have to worry about forgetting your phone? Every one of these activities would constitute a legitimate use case. Unfortunately, not all of us are friendly. As security professionals, we need to start looking beyond what we're comfortable with, beyond the normal attacks that we've heard about for years. The attacks in the end game may not have changed, but the delivery methods have come right off the movie screens and into our companies, infrastructures, and data centers. Security administrators know the normal attack vectors: USB drives, phishing, CVEs, the list goes on and on. But how do you address the fact that any one of your employees could potentially have a full Linux system to RFID or NFC chips beneath their skin? What if somebody implanted a human interface, or an HID or a proximity access chip? There would be no evidence of any type of compromise to the naked eye. The chips that I'm talking about implement the same technologies that enterprises are using: RFID door badges, NFC for IoT, MyFair, HID, or Indala, or for proximity cards. And that's just a few. With the number of regulations and audits that companies are required to do for compliance, how would you know if somebody has bypassed your entire security policy and brought a rogue asset into your environment? The very simple answer is you wouldn't. The peg leg is a single board computer that is modified to a minimalist form factor with a wireless charging receiver and then encased in biopolymer. No, I'm not a RoboCop. I'm the farthest thing from a cop you'll ever find. Most cops don't look like me and didn't spend most of their time in their youth as a black hat. So continuing onward with this, I'm sorry, that just caught my eye. the peg leg, like I was saying, it's got a wireless charging receiver encased in biopolymer and then implanted within the body. This is out on the outer edges of extreme, even for most grinders or transhumans. This is not a simple process, and making sure that your SBC is completely sealed has caused a ton of individuals that have attempted this implant to require emergency removal surgery. This still doesn't stop many more, including myself, from trying to get one implanted. These devices have Wi-Fi as well as Bluetooth capabilities and can be accessed over SSH from a mobile device. This would allow a bad actor to have access to binaries or even something as widely known as responder. They can be made into rogue access points as well as command and control servers. You know, the possibility for a concealed Linux distribution are only limited by one's imagination. Originally intended to act as a logless file transfer drop, the peg leg was originally designed to leverage the Pirate Box software. However, as with anything in the technology space, people took that simple idea and it branched out into more creative or devious areas based on your perspective. Full Linux distributions have been implanted. These devices, like I said, are headless, but they do have that Wi-Fi access point configured to allow access to the implanted device. Once connected, the attacker has access to a terminal for interactive processes, or can be set to perform non-interactive scans and sweeps for low-energy Bluetooth. It could be utilized for an attack like Blueborn. Oh yeah, I know. Or working in conjunction with a USB share application like Virtual Here. Nope, slides aren't stuck. We haven't moved on yet. An attacker could execute mouse jacking attacks, inject automated payloads with tools like Jacket, all while standing and having a casual conversation at somebody's desk. The total number of peg legs out there is not widely known. This was very much a community-based project. However, the fact that there's at least one individual that has this should be more than enough for any security administrator to take notice. You know, so let's just take a minute to think about this. How, as a security admin, can we regulate secure locations if people have the ability to conceal full computers within the body? This becomes an even greater challenge for companies and governmental agencies who may require elevated clearance to access physical locations or specific files. This essentially removes the power and the control from the security authority by obfuscating systems that can be leveraged for nefarious purposes. So let's continue. These are some of the attack vectors that I actually released back at RSA back in February. We'll get into the Q&A a little bit later, and we can talk about airports, TSA, and all that when I get done. I promise I'll give you guys time. We're going to start our showing actual attacks with my implants. So the first one is around the issue of physical access. Any company out there is going to have restricted locations on-prem, whether that's executive offices, to supply rooms, to server rooms. The need to keep access restricted in some locations is just a part of doing business. I'd be willing to bet a large number of people in attendance here have a badge that looks kind of like one of these. Hopefully you don't look exactly like every piece of hacker clip art ever made, but yeah, that's my actual work ID. You know, I bet that a lot of you guys out there have those. And I bet would also be willing to bet that a lot of people feel that that type of badge and reader system is an acceptable risk from an audit perspective, and as such should appease your C-level execs to the fact that your physical locations are secure. I really hope nobody here believes that. You know, how many of us are spatially aware to the point where if we were talking face to face, okay, let's add a little caveat to that and say pre-COVID, and if we were you were talking to somebody, say somebody like me, would you notice if I palmed a tool like the Proxmark Chameleon Mini and I was able to scan your access badge while we were talking? I hear it all the time that there is no way that somebody would be able to do that to me. Well, I hope you're right, because there are countless case studies out there that involve cloned access badges. The act of cloning a badge isn't new. This technology has been commercially available for over a decade. What makes this attack vector different is that there's no IOCs to the breach. Unlike the old days where an attacker would need to have a copy of the clone key or a battery pack for the Proxmark to replay the scraped data, now attackers can write this information to a subdermal implant and proceed with no way for any security professional to know how their access system has been compromised. So let's talk about our first attack demonstration. I named this attack Handshake. Handshake is a clone and replay attack that utilizes a tool like a Proxmark or any other tool that can actually read RFID data and then take that data and copy it back down to one of my implants. In this case, we're going to be using the implant in my left hand, which is the MyFair Classic 1K. So let's go ahead and let's kick off the video. So this is a little bit of a long video, so we're going to talk this through. We're going to start off by actually just triggering our Proxmark Chameleon Mini. Like I said, yes, this is my badge. And before anybody out there who wants to try and use the information I'm going to show you, I've had it reprogrammed since then. But what you can see here is we've actually been able to read the UID of my actual badge. From there, we can go ahead and create a dump file. We're going to rename that after we take a quick look at it, and we're going to give it a friendly name of Lens ID. And we notice that for the most part, all the sectors except for sector 0, line 1 are all the same. So now let's get a base read off of my implant. So we're going to go ahead and hold the Proxmark up to my implant. And then we're going to switch the screen back over to our app, and we'll see that we've now acquired a new UID. Again, let's go ahead and we'll take a look at the dump, and we will give it a nice friendly name of Lens Implant. So there's our dump. And let's go ahead and rename this to a nice little friendly name of Implant. So now, what we're going to do, just to show you, as an attacker, once I have that scraped, I can do anything I want with it. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually upload these into Google Drive. If I'm part of some type of hacking collective, I can actually work with the rest of my team, or even if I'm just a lone individual, this gives me a backup that I can come back to at a later time. From there, we're going to go ahead and I'm going to open up the MyFair Classic tool. I'm actually going to pull both of those dumps into this tool, and then we're going to go ahead and do a diff on them. So this takes just a moment to do. Navigating up into Google Drive, pulling down those dumps, importing them into the MyFair Classic tool. Imported the first one. Okay. Now we're going to import the second. And then we're going to go ahead and we're going to do our diff. So we can actually see the differences between the implant and the actual ID. So we're going to start off with implant, and then we're going to go with Lens ID. You'll notice that the only thing that's different is sector 0, line A. So now, all we have to do is go back into the MyFair Classic tool, turn around, select Lens ID, and then turn around and write this back down to the implant on my hand. Takes just a few moments. Now keep in mind, if this was a real attack, this can be done in a bathroom. Somebody could walk outside. This does not need to be a situation where the attacker needs to leave the proximity of the location where the card or can be used or where it was actually stolen from. So let's go ahead and we're going to, there's our new tag. Let's go ahead and start mapping the ID directly down to the implant. Now we'll go ahead, we're going to go back into our Proxmark application, and we're going to scan my hand now that we've written the data back down. Again, we're going to get another UID that it's found, and we're going to create that dump file, and we're going to call this one Implant 2. We'll notice that the UIDs are the same. It's the same implant. So now, if we go ahead and take a look, we'll see that my implant, the data contained in sector 0, line 1, is exactly the same that was on my original badge. At this point, Anything that I do in terms of accessing your physical locations, your security team would have a very difficult time trying to understand how I got in there, even if I was searched. Moving on to our next attack vector. This one's going to be around NFC or near field communication. This is an amazing technology that many of us have in our pockets right now. Every Android device out there that's been created within the last 2 to 3 years, I mean, there were some cheap ones, but pretty much all of them have full access to transmit or receive NFC data natively. Apple is a bit more complicated to explain functionality. With iOS 11, iPhones 7, 8, and X can actually be used to read NFC tags. iPhone 6 and 6S can be used to make NFC payments with Apple Pay, but has no ability to read standalone NFC tags natively. Apple at this time only allows NFC tags to be read via apps. There's no native support for native reads. So I can almost hear all the iPhone people out there cheering. You get a pass on this one for now. But I was reading an article as recently as last week where a lot of the proprietary access to the Apple NFC chip is currently being challenged in Europe. We'll have to wait and see how this plays out, but the iPhones may wind up being as vulnerable as Androids very soon. So like I just said, so moving onward, standard NFC utilization can be almost anything from beaming a file to a coworker or friend using a key fob or app to transmit a signal to a receiver to allow some type of action to take place. Here's where it gets interesting. NFC gets its power from the receiver. There's no internal power required to be able to keep a loaded tag in waiting. The implant that I'm going to use for this first attack is going to be that large FlexNext NFC chip with the great range on it. I'm going to be showing you guys 2 different attack vectors that exploit NFC. The first one I named Leprosy. The second one I call Fleshhook. Same protocol, 2 completely different attacks, 2 completely different payloads. The first attack, Leprosy. This attack may not always work as there are a few conditions that need to be met in order to be able to execute properly. First, NFC must be enabled. And number 2, allow apps from unknown sources must be enabled under the developer's tools. At this point, it's just a matter of social engineering a situation where I can get my hands physically on your device. I know I hear this every time I've given this presentation. I never let my phone out of my sight. That's fine. I don't need it out of your sight. This attack, as well as Fleshhook, are designed to be performed in plain sight and actually standing right next to my victim. I don't think it'd be a large stretch of the imagination to assume that if we were all actually physically together and I was to make a huge scene about an issue with my wife or maybe my daughter or my granddaughter, and I was pleading for somebody to help me make a phone call, I know the Good Samaritan out there and someone would be there to be my victim. We all have a built-in innate sense of decency and nobody wants to appear uncaring. And me as an attacker and a social engineer, I will do everything in my power to take advantage of it. Once the phone or tablet is in my hands, the receiver in the device will pick up the tag I have programmed in my hand that is currently pointing at a web location containing an infected APK that was created with MSF Venom. Anybody not familiar with MSF Venom? It's part of the Metasploit attack framework and used to create reverse connections back to the command and control server. So I've got the device in my hands, the chip is programmed, prompted me to either install or save the file. I go through the motions of what appears to be making a phone call. What I'm actually doing is loading the APK and then quickly returning the device back to you. This attack is going to provide me persistence, as well as creating a hidden icon so you, the owner, would not be able to see anything out of the ordinary in your applications list. What if this was a work phone? What if this was your device you do your banking with? In this scenario, I'm already in your phone before I've even left the room. And from the Metasploit server, I can gain access to your contacts, emails, photos, downloads, essentially anything that is on that device. So let's take a look at what this looks like in a real attack. So let's set the stage a little bit. The top terminal is my ngrok session, and the bottom is where we're actually going to be launching our Metasploit console. So we start off by launching Metasploit, and then we're going to go ahead and load our listener's resource file. In this case, it's going to be Leprosy and Rock, and we'll start our listener. At this point, watch how fast this actually happens. Oh my God, thank you for letting me use your phone. Oh my goodness, what is my wife's phone number? 734. I mean, come on, who actually remembers who remembers phone numbers anymore? They're all in my phone. So, oh geez, 73446. Oh geez, the phone just actually ran out of power a second ago. I can't tell you how much I really appreciate the fact that you're helping me out like this. 734. Oh my God, I can't remember. Here, take your phone. I'm just going to go charge mine. That's all it took. You can see from my Metasploit framework, I've already got my reverse connection going. From here, I'm not going to do too much as far as the post exploit. Just to show that we actually do have the connection, I've dumped the call logs, SMS, and I'm just going to quickly jump into a shell to navigate the actual storage of the device and show you that we're actually in the device. So that quickly, I can be in that device before I've even left standing there. So for our final demonstration, we're actually going to be introducing my attack, Fleshhook. In this use case, I have programmed the chip in my hand to point to a very specific website that's been compromised with the Beef suite. Beef is the browser extension exploit framework. This infects or hooks the browsers of any device that connects and allows remote code execution as well as persistence. Through the Beef suite, the attacker can enumerate all the local LAN that the device is connected to, as well as execute advanced phishing attacks executed on the device itself. Again, this requires just a little bit of social engineering, but just like we just showed, this is really not a problem, and that is honestly all that's required. So, again, we're going to do this real quick. Let's go ahead and show you guys what Fleshhook looked like. So the first thing we're going to do is actually go ahead and start the Beef suite. And the truth is, this attack actually takes less time than it does to actually open up Beef. So we've got our Beef running. Now let's go ahead and log into the web UI. From here, we're going to go ahead and log in as the Beef user. And you'll see on the left-hand side of the screen, if you're not familiar with Beef, right now I have no online browsers. So once again, oh my goodness, hey man, can I borrow your phone for just a second? In this case, what I've done is created a complete duplicate of the Putty website. But this isn't Putty. Just like before, if we watch our Beef suite console, we'll see that now I actually have an Android device that's actually been connected. Once again, not really going to be doing a lot in terms of post-exploitation because the whole point behind this discussion is the attack vector. So, but I will jump in here just a little bit just to kind of show you that I am connected. To Curtis Blas, I hope I'm not mispronouncing your name. Correct. Never give anybody your phone again. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to run a quick little geolocation script. And we're going to go ahead and take a look here. And you'll see here, it says that I am in Texas, closest city, Pflugerville. That is where my switching station was. I do live just outside of Austin, Texas. So this brings us to the future. Who will we become as technology continues to evolve? When we talk about the future of implants, it's almost as if we're trying to write a brand new science fiction movie. Companies like Tesla are working on technology like the Neuralink. This is a brain implant that will allow interfacing between the brain directly to a computer system. This honestly sounds like a man-in-the-middle scenario just waiting to happen. Products like the Willet. This is a Bluetooth receiver that requires no batteries and gets its power from the air. And we all know that Bluetooth is not vulnerable, right? Ever heard of Blueborn? Imagine if that attack could jump from person to person. Or what about implantable Wi-Fi transmitters and receivers? There's a product right now in development called the Neurograin. Nobody's ever been able to compromise a Wi-Fi network, right? Well, the Neurograin really is hoping to turn massive amounts of human beings into one of the world's largest Wi-Fi mesh networks. So these are just what we know about. Currently, the biggest restriction to advanced implantable technology is still the power source. There's not currently an effective way to provide clean power to any devices on a commercial implant. It's the same issue with the peg leg and why we have that need for that indirect fast charging. It's not always the computer technology that needs to catch up. In this case, the only thing holding back progress is power. Once that's been addressed, the possibility of a 24/7 access to an embedded system in the body is not a far stretch. I want to take a moment here to talk about the legality, morality, and ethical issues around implanted technologies. From a legal perspective, there's no federal laws regarding microchip implants. At the state level, as you can see from the graphic here on the screen, there are multiple states that have adopted different types of legislation. There are essentially two types of laws that have been passed around microchip implants within the US. One mainly focuses around employers, and one that is basically more general. The first one is a ban on employers mandating employee microchip implants. And yes, this was actually attempted. There were some companies out there that tried to force their employees into getting microchipped to address issues around time clocks and attendance. And then there's also just a general ban on any type of selective or elective style microchip implants, period, within certain states. So let's talk about the liability from an employer's perspective. If an employee gets chipped, does that in and of itself make that employee a security risk? What if they're just using the chip to access a gym or a garage that has nothing to do with the company, but the chip could be used in an offensive manner? Would that be something that a CISO would want to know? We allow employees to bring personal phones to work, excluding restricted areas, but detection is a hell of a lot more obvious. Much of the current legislation stems from a push to replace access badges with implants for physical security. But as this may help from a I lost my badge perspective, it doesn't enhance the security posture for a company. Remember, implanted chips at this point are static. They require a reader or a power source to be able to function. Now, just like with the handshake attack, bad actors could use the same tools and scrape the target's implants information the same as if it was a physical key card. The main difference being that you can take your key card and lock it at home when you go out. Implants that are on all the time, if there's a receiver within range, they will read that chip. There's currently no off switch, and as such, attackers now have 24/7 access to physical access data. When the concept of morality and ethics come up, unfortunately, the topic of faith typically comes into play as well. I want to take a moment and say that I'm in no way trying to be disrespectful to any religion, faith, or ideology. I'm just speaking to questions that I have personally heard. As an international speaker, I have had discussions with people all over the world about my implants. The discussions typically go in one of two directions. Mostly it starts with fear from whoever is talking to me. I've been told that I have the mark of the beast. I've been told that I'm being tracked by the man. I've actually had somebody ask me if this is what happened after I got my COVID vaccine. All of these conversations are driven by the fear of the unknown or difference. I've had acquaintances tell me that they are physically afraid of me due to my implants. Don't know what they're afraid of. It's almost like they think I'm going to turn into a Terminator and go on a rampage. The truth is that there are more people like me out there than you could ever imagine. The difference is that I don't have a problem with people knowing who and what I am. Although many other people like me keep their implants secret over the concern of the social stigma that's been associated with microchipping. The decision to augment ourselves should have no weight, in my opinion, in regards to the issues of faith or morality, provided that the decision is still left with the individual and in no way a mandate from any type of authority. I did say earlier that not all of us are friendly, but most of us are. Finally, I'd like to ask, how far is too far? You know, we've briefly touched on the Tesla's Neuralink and the peg leg. Two very different products with broad sweeping ramifications to the individual as well as the employer and law enforcement. I'm going to carbon date myself here, but I remember a movie from back in 1995 called Johnny Mnemonic, where the lead actor had a hard drive in his brain and is used as a storage device by a courier for stolen data. Or The Matrix, where if we want to learn a new skill, we just upload the instruction set and we've got that knowledge in our minds. The genie is out of the bottle and there's no way it's going to go back in. As technology continues to advance and improve the quality of life that we have, we need to remember that any tool, regardless of what its original intent was meant to be, can be misused. And as security professionals, we need to be aware of this and adapt our countermeasures to include these new attack vectors. The fact that there's nothing unilateral across the board with it means that in most locations, it's going to come down to some type of a corporate decision on how to address chipped employees. Without a better understanding of the technologies being discussed, these choices may be made for the wrong reasons. To say anybody with an implanted technology is an automatic threat, in my opinion, is the same as saying that anybody with a car could potentially be a vehicular manslaughter suspect. So let's talk about a few takeaways. You know, if you really want to get these contactless technologies and protect yourself against these attack vectors, within the next week or two, identify if you may have any contactless systems that are deployed within your environments. Within the next 3 months, you should be able to have a full understanding of the scope of your vulnerabilities, as well as starting to evaluate and define the addition of new security protocols to add as a second factor to those contactless configurations. And within the next 6 months, you should be at the implementation stage of that second factor. This will remove an attacker's ability to compromise access with only the tag information that can be scraped. So I'd like to take a few seconds here just to talk about some of the mitigation strategies around both RFID and NFC. For RFID, look into switches. Switches require both the tag as well as a code to be entered into a keypad, essentially multi-factor your RFID transactions. Locking passwords. A lock password is a 32-bit password which it gets transmitted before a tag will transmit its data. This will take care of any type of skimmers, and it's a simple and popular way to protect passive UHF systems, which often have limited computational abilities. Look into basic access controls. The reader must supply a specific key before the tag will reveal any personal information that'll block potential skimming. This method is commonly applied to protect the sensitive data stored in passports from being read by outsiders. And finally, mutual authentication. In this process, the sensor will send a line of code to the tag, which will decipher it using the key, which is known to both entities. If the tag is successful, it can then sign a line of code back to be deciphered by the reader. Once both the tag and the reader are certain that neither is an imposter, then they can transmit their data. This method prevents anyone from stealing the data through skimming, because no other reader would know what that key is, and eavesdropping, because the key itself is never actually sent between the reader and the tag. NFC. The most important advice around NFC that I can give you. If you're not using it, turn it off. Stay on top of your patch management. Manufacturers update firmware all the time. Be vigilant in staying current. Educate your employees about the fact that NFC is not a secure protocol at its core. And finally, utilize blocking shields for tags when they're not in use. To that point, I have chips all inside my hands. The only way that I can protect myself is I actually wound up going out and actually having Faraday cloth gloves made so that I can even turn my own hands off. So with that, I've got about 7 to 10 minutes for some Q&A. So how can I help you guys? Any questions? Anything you guys want to talk? Do you think human or animals can be used as bioattack threats for terrorism or human robot? Yes, actually I do. Keep in mind, like I said, the chips themselves are in a static, excuse me. All of the implant chips that are available on the market now are in a passive state. Information is written to the chips, and then in order to actually get anything back from those chips, you'll have to be within range of a reader in order to be able to do it. I can see where you could definitely do this within humans. Depending on what type of reader system that you're looking at, I can see where the idea of using animals as a courier for the chips, yeah, I definitely could see it. The only issue you would need to know is how close that chip could get to an actual reader to be able to scan. Let's see. Where do we get further info? Do you have links to any of your reference materials? No, actually, there's no cert for this. And if you want to know the truth, I know of about 5 or 6 different red teamers that have similar capabilities as me, but I believe I'm one of the first people to actually come out in a security mindset and actually brought this out. Pioneer, that's one way to call it. My wife calls me an idiot, but you know, I just, for me, it was just a natural evolution. You know, I'm tattooed from my head to my feet. I am into body modifications, brandings, piercings, suspensions. So when I found out that you could actually start shoving microchips in your body, I was definitely all for it. If you're interested, you can definitely search for transhuman. In my opinion, one of the best places for information. Get involved in the forums over at Dangerous Things. You don't need an implant to join, but the grinder community there is just probably, in my opinion, one of the best. You know, there's discussions around implants, rejections, protecting your implants from being written by somebody that you don't want, and closing them out. General questions. The only thing that I would say, if you're going to join the forums, go in with an open mind. I will say that if you decide to go in and be a troll, it will not end well for you. You know, we're used to being picked on, and they'll give it back. What happens when you need an MRI? The MRI is a major concern. I do have it within my medical files here within, the United States, where I am to have no MRIs. I'm actually going to be going and getting some tattoos right up here above my wrists. And I'm also, that say no MRI, and I'm actually even considering getting a medical alert brace necklace that states no MRI. Other limitations, going through customs and airplanes and airports and airplane security is, I wouldn't call it so much a limitation, but I will say that it's definitely heavy question time. And it's very difficult to convince some people that I'm not some kind of terrorist, but usually going Google me, and the fact that I spoke at RSA, it's tense. It's very, very tense for a little while. On a daily basis, honestly, if I'm not actually using my chips for an engagement or a presentation, I leave them in an unloaded state. I live on a 15-acre ranch out in the middle of nowhere, so from my day-to-day, it's not that big of a deal. But let me show you. These are actually my protection gloves, and you can see right here, I've actually have this Faraday cloth actually sewn inside all the gloves. If I'm going out in public, and especially if I'm going to some type of conference such as DEF CON, Sector, GERCON, Black Hat. You'll find me wearing gloves all the time. I have about 2 minutes to go. Is there any other questions? Okay, if that, what about a heart pacemaker? Well, the truth is, when it comes to Killwear, I am completely against Killwear. Completely against it. Older pacemaker technology was straight up RFID. It's not as prevalent now. They've moved over to Bluetooth utilizing Java cards and other safety precautions in new next generation cardiac pacemakers, stem transmitters, insulin pumps. I do think that the medical industry is going to have to really start stepping up their game more. For example, I know somebody very well who is type 1 diabetic, insulin pump. We did a quick black box pen test against it, and it had a default Bluetooth setting. So, the idea of Killwear, I find absolutely disgusting. But at the end of the day, I am of a much different school. I'm an old school, Detroiter. I don't believe that it's anybody's job to protect me but me. To that point, if you have an implant, be very, very cautious. If you have an old implant, look into getting something that's, a next generation that's going to not be vulnerable to those attacks. I'll close in regards to Killwear. You cannot hack what isn't there. I understand that, we're dealing with people's health and surgery is a major concern, but if you wouldn't allow it within your data center because you feel that your data is that worth that much to protect, I would like to think that we feel that our lives would be worth that much to protect. Yeah, I believe Dick Cheney did have a pacemaker, and there are, once again, that was one of the older models. Do you think the stigma will decrease or increase as more population is getting tech savvy? I think that's actually one of the best questions so far today. There is a new implant that was recently released in Europe. It's called the Wallet More. And it allows you to link your debit card to a subdermal implant and pay with a tap to pay, the same way you would do with the Android Wallet or Apple Pay. I think this is going to be, I think the fact that we're going to start seeing more people using this for the ability for commercial transactions, I think that's going to start to normalize it a little bit more. I think the more people see it, and to be honest, that's one of the reasons that I feel that this is a really great topic, because it's going to get people talking. Just because I have implants doesn't mean that I'm going to always be doing something bad. And, I don't think somebody who uses an implant just to get into their garage should have people looking at them like they're anything less than another human being. Big Brother can control you. No, that is not true in the least. Remember, these implants are tied to specific frequencies and specific protocols. Additionally, I have the ability to write the chip and then close the chip, which means that it's no longer able to be read or written. And as such, there's no government agency or Big Brother that yeah, I agree. Full Faraday suits are gonna be a thing soon, but no. Now, I'm not gonna say if you're uncareful with an unclosed tag that somebody couldn't sneak up, write something to it, and close it. That is definitely possible, and that is the reasons why I have my Faraday gloves. But the idea that a government or some authoritarian regime could come in and control you. These things are essentially nothing more than passing a line of code. So until we have like a Neuralink and the chip activates something that forces your brain to do something, you're still in control at all times. It would be more of the tech savvy. What kind of exploiting will happen when your average Joe with no tech knowledge gets implants? That is the whole point behind why I'm doing these presentations. This is here. This isn't something that's coming 5 years down the road. This is out now, and if we don't know what we're looking for, how do you stop an attack that you don't know exists? Not all of us are offensive. Not all of us are black hats, but it's our job to protect our environments and our data centers and the reputations of our companies. So I'm actually out of time today, guys. I invite everybody, reach out to me over LinkedIn. Come check out my GitHub and my YouTube channels. And if you guys, like I said, if you're interested and you want the blood and the gore and to see how to make a cyborg, do a search for DC 44191 or just search Eventbrite for Len No. I believe it's next Wednesday. This will be the how to make a cyborg presentation. So with that, I appreciate everybody. Search for Hacker 213. I'll put my information in the chat here in just a moment. But I wanted to say thank you very much. I appreciate everybody. One last time, there's my information for anybody who wants to grab a quick screen capture. Yes, that QR code is safe. QR jacking at an actual security event, probably not the wisest thing if I ever want to be invited back. But there is my YouTube, my Twitter, my GitHub, and my LinkedIn. I hope everybody out there has an amazing weekend. If you're going to be in Toronto at the end of the month, I will be live in attendance for Sector. Come search me out. I'll be hanging out at the CyberArk booth. Thank you guys very much for your time. Thank you for actually being here, and I look forward to seeing everybody out in the real world once this pandemic's over. Take care and have a great one.